It's not the meeting. Is it now live? Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to. Welcome everyone to the Planning and Transport Policy Subcommittee here at John and Dean House in Taunton. My name is Ross White and I'll be chairing the meeting this afternoon. The members of the committee are myself, Councillor Darch, Councillor Evans and Councillor Wilkins, and in the room together with us are a number of other councillors and officers. Right, first of all, I think we need to ensure that everyone is okay online, and we will be running a webcast today, and the people in the room are the ones who are going to be among the decision makers. The meeting is open to the public and partners and can be observed remotely. The agenda pack has already been distributed via the council website and Mod.gov for all members. And if anybody wishes to speak, I'd be grateful if you can clearly identify yourself before speaking. This meeting will be audio recorded, and finally, the agenda is also available online as well as I indicated on the website. And can I ask people to use the page numbers in the agenda pack to make sure that people are aware of the item you're referring to. I have received no apologies for absence. Is that still the case? Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And we now have the minutes of the previous meeting, and they were distributed, and with my apologies, slightly later than the full agenda, but they have been available for some days now, and I'm asking the members of the committee if they have any amendments or corrections. No, people content with that, thank you. Could I then have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Evans, Councillor Darch, and could I have all people content with it? Thank you very much indeed. Right, we will then move on to public question time. I'm aware of 3 questions potentially with us today. And my apologies, I've just realised I jumped the gun. Declarations of interest. Do I have any from members of the committee, please? No. Okay, thank you for that. On to question time, and we have 3 speakers. The first one, unfortunately, has now informed me that he is unable to attend. The submission was there and quite clearly in the papers regarding the Wales Neighbourhood Plan, and there will be a written response to Councillor Winston, and that will also be published as part of the minutes of this meeting. Are people content with that? We then move on to Councillor Hazel from Norton St Philip. Is he with us this afternoon, Ian? He is online. Oh, great. Welcome. Question.
Thank you. Can I first check that you can hear me properly?
Absolutely, no problem, Ian.
Lovely, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting today. My name is Ian Hazel, and I am the chairman of Norton St Philip Parish Council. Why are we here today? It's because of errors made nearly 5 years ago by a planning inspector when Mendip's LPP2 was going through its hearing stage. The inspector suggested that Mendip allocate an additional 505 dwellings to only the area around Midsummer Norton and 3 villages in the northeast of Mendip, i.e. directly against Mendip's own policies in the adopted LPP1. Our PC's only option to correct this error was to take out a judicial review reluctantly against Mendip for adopting a flawed plan. In his judgment following the JR, Lord Justice Holgate stated, "I am left in no doubt that the inspector who examined LPP2 misinterpreted LPP1. The consequent order from the judge directed Mendip to turn the clocks back to 2019 and reallocate the 505 to the whole Mendip area and in line with the policies in LPP1. So that's why we're here today. 2 judicial reviews in the High Court, 5 years lost, hundreds of thousands of pounds spent, and a forecast in this report of more than another 300,000 needing to be spent. All this to correct an obvious error from the inspector. We have now submitted a formal complaint to the Planning Inspectorate seeking an apology and compensation for this error. As for this report, it's exactly what should have been done 5 years ago. When our parish council was asked by the High Court as an interested party to comment on the requested variation of the order by Somerset Council, i.e. requiring more time to complete the task, our response was no objection. This was because we recognised the magnitude and scope of the work that needed to be carried out. My parish council will study the consultation document carefully, but from what I have read, it is clear that council officers have carried out an enormous amount of work to comply with the court order and prepare the report which is before you today. It has truly been a difficult task, and for this, I commend them. Our parish and myself therefore strongly support the recommendations made to this committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hizzle. And I appreciate your comments, and I would agree and echo with them. There has been a huge amount of work undertaken very rapidly by the officers of the council to come to this position. So I appreciate, and I'm sure they do, the recognition of that work. Thank you very much indeed. Right, shall we move on to the third question? And I believe the gentleman's with us today. Councillor Bergen, you want to come and sit down at the front?
Thank you. I was welcome good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As you're probably aware on your agenda, Richmond Thornthorpe Parish Council have their neighbourhood plan up for you to make today. Yes, you'll all agree, hopefully. I've been on Parish Council for a long time, over 40 years. I can't count any further back than that. This task of doing generating our neighbourhood plan has probably been the most involved thing I've ever done, apart from the local plan when I was a district councillor for a while. Don't hold that against me. Sorry for the people in Milton Heathfield, but there we are. So I do know a little bit about planning. I was executive member for transport and planning for a period. I've still got the scars on my back. They are healing slowly. That's what I'm saying. You see, it's bad news. Anyway, enough of this. I promised only to speak for 60 seconds. But Mr. Clayton and myself, gentleman over there, we are members of the Neighbourhood Planning Steering Group, and we thought we'd like to come in this afternoon to witness the end of what's been a very long story. First of all, I'd like to, on behalf of Parish Council, the Richmond Thornthorpe, and I'd like to thank you for expediting the making of our plan so quickly after our referendum last Thursday. We took about 6 weeks to do it. The next thing I know is by next week. That's a good job. This marks the end of a long road. During the journey, We've been grateful for the help we've received from this council and the old Somerset West Consultant being Borough Council officers, probably a lot of the same. We would particularly like to thank, don't blush, Anne Rhodes for her patience, technical knowledge and advice, without which life would have been very difficult. Thank you very much, Anne. I've got to keep in with you because you might want some more help. We hope that this council will take into consideration our neighbourhood plan whilst drawing up the emerging county plan. I thought I'd put that in a bit of tongue in cheek. It's been working for an awful long time. We look forward to informing our colleagues on the parish council that the plan has been made. I'm sure it will be. I'll have more to come if it isn't. But thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and joining us
That's
today.
right.
And I would just recognise the huge amount of work which goes into every neighbourhood plan. And I sit on my own local one, and I was talking about questionnaires and evidence at 10:15 last night. And that is, I know, quite common for an awful lot of neighbourhood plans, huge amount of effort. So thank you for that.
It's good fun, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, okay then, I have no other questions, so thank you for our speakers today, and we'll move on to item 5, and this is the forward plan of this committee, and I will ask our head planner to introduce the forward plan.
Thank you, Chair. There are a number of items already listed for the next scheduled meeting on the 16th of April. In addition to the items listed, can we please add the Nexus LDO, which we hope to get to that committee as well. Otherwise, there's no other amendments, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Are we happy just to note it? Yep, I have not, so we'll move on then to item 6, and this is the infamous local plan part 2 limited update. And we have with us this afternoon Andres Esbini, who has been working hard and burying the scars along with other people on this, as the previous speaker mentioned. Would you like to introduce your report, please, Andres?
I've put a few slides which will show in a minute. I'll just quickly comment on the report, which essentially brings before you a consultation report, an initial consultation statement of the consultation is going to be out, and you're being asked to approve the proposed sites in response to the judge's order to reconsider sites. So asking you to agree those sites, as well as the package material goes out for consultation. The report also picks up on a couple of issues which were raised at the December meeting, one about getting critical friend support, because I think the reference has been made to the amount of work here, and so how conscious we are that we don't want to extend the legal proceedings if at all possible. And also at that time, we've applied to the High Court to amend the timetable. A lot of work has gone in, making submissions to the judge, hasn't at this moment, is not yet agreed those, so we're still waiting for the decision. So we're hopeful, but we've had to put a lot of work to convince him even to amend the timetable, which is now going up in consultation.
Okay, you see you have a slide? They're coming up.
They are.
Great, thank you.
Again, I'm not going to go through the legal background, that's covered in the executive committee, and I think also first speaker to some extent. Just to say that this does fall out of the judicial review for the part 2, and specific directions given as a result of that judgment for us to do certain things. So it's an unusual hybrid of being asked to consider sites within a very tight timetable, Also specifically to go through what's the equivalent of a full local plan process, including public examination sites, which would eventually be added to local plan option. And the reason we did that, or reason the judge took that option, was to keep the existing local plan in place. It's still an excellent plan, still has absolute plan decisions. That's why I call it a limited update rather than full, so it can't be confused with full review. And also what was very clear is this was not something you could just burn to a full sunset plan. Not an option as in legal obligations. We're only looking at this 505 homes. For those who don't know why it's 505, the original examination, we extended the plan period, which from 2028 to 29, which is where this 500 homes not allocated anywhere comes from. So we're only looking at sites to address that bottom of housing. I think, as was mentioned earlier, we're somewhat going back into history because this was started in 2019. And we're mindful the plan doesn't have that long to go forward, even though we've got to do this process. And that given what happened in part 2, we decided and committed to the judge, we will do a full review of all available sites in the Somerset East area. And particularly looking at the normal criteria, which are suitable and sustainable sites, which comply with the adopted plan settlement strategy. We're not changing our strategy for distribution and growth. And also ones which actually can come forward by 2029, no putting in large sites which are going to come forward, which really should be considered in the Somerset plan if they're coming to 2030. In terms of what we're publishing, we've got a consultation document. There'll also be a sustainability appraisal report, habitat regulations assessment, and then there'll also be assessments for each individual site. And some of these sites have been seen by the Somerset East members. We've had a couple of workshops, both with a lot of technical officers and with members, where they've seen the sites in detail. So everything sites they're aware of. These aren't in the pack. These will be coming out at the time of the supporting materials. So you can see each site has a fairly detailed assessment on its characteristics, but there's an assessment in terms of sustainability. In terms of what we're consulting on, we're asking people about what we've counted essentially towards the 505. Potentially around our approach, which is going to be this limited update. The sites that we've chosen, and also the sustainability appraisal, so it has to be subject to public consultation. I expect others won't agree with our selection, so we're likely to receive comments on alternatives. But they're going to have to be more sustainable and more deliverable than the ones we put in our plan. I'm sure what we said about settlements will get comments on as well. And at this stage, there is the opportunity for the council to review what's come back and produce a final version. What we're not consulting on, and it is quite important engagement because it's an unusual exercise, it's only part of Somerset. We're not changing our settlement strategy. We're not changing the basis on which we selected sites in the first place. We're not actually changing anything in local plan part 2, with the exception of policy ST3, where we designated an area for future growth. We think since we've designated future growth, we should identify some housing there. And also, this isn't about the future Somerset plan. It's not about other areas of Somerset. And also, it's not a consultation. We want to try and keep separate some sites which might be under consideration as applications. So it's a bit uncomfortable when we've got a planning application and a local plan process at the same time. But you know, it's not our job to consider the specifics of a planning application. There'll be a 6-week consultation starting week commencing 26th of February. That will roughly run to mid-April. And it's 6 weeks because that is what is in our statement of community involvement. And this is a development plan, so we must really align with the minimum standards that are set out there, so it must follow those. And that's part of the later examination process. Mainly be on the consultation portal in the same way we've done other consultations, but then we'll look at the material in the specifically the Mendon shared learning office, the hubs in Somerset East. And I think we will certainly do some online briefings as we've done before for public and parish and town councils, probably beginning and end of March. Potentially some other, there's an agents forum in March, we'll certainly present there. And potentially also have a meeting with our stakeholders, digital formal stakeholders. So just in terms of next steps, I think it's on the forward plan that once that consultation is finished, we're going to bring that back to this meeting in the middle of June. We've given an undertaking to the High Court, provided they agree it, that we go out to the next stage of consultation by the end of June. Now that's slightly different process in that that's where formal representations are invited, which eventually find their way to the planning inspector. So we don't have the ability to change the plan again. I think one of the aspects of this whole process is this expedited nature of the process. It's not seeing local plans go through quite a number of iterative stages, at least currently, where you can amend things as you go along with it. We don't have the luxury of that for this exercise, which is quite focused. And then again, we aim to get those representations and the proposals submitted by the 30th of September. That then means an inspector will be appointed. We hope to have an inspection, well, potentially the end of the year or early 2025, which is that's not way away, but we're pretty. In terms of what you're being asked to agree, essentially it is the consultation. The documents here are working drafts, so there's a little bit of tweaking and a bit of filling. And I've said that it's still subject to the comments you might to make. Last reason to post sites, because that's what the judge asked us to do, reconsider the sites. So agree 6 week public consultation, and then essentially note that this will be coming back to you within June. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions on the slides or indeed on the report itself? Could I just make one point of clarification? The 2 workshops Andre referred to with members were for the members of Planning East area, not for all members of the council, because this was very specifically around this Planning East local plan. Questions from Councillor Evans and Councillor Dutch?
Is my light come on? Keep pushing the button at times, it might work. Thank you. So first of all, a point of clarification on what was just said. When you say members of the Planning East area, do you mean the committee or do you mean all members that are elected? All members that are elected in that area. I just want to clarify that was the case. Notice that it will be available through the hubs. Can you just clarify locations of those, please?
I think that the ones in the main towns, so it'll be through Glastonbury, through Shepton Mills, Memphis, and Wells.
We're using the wells and the library sites in each of the towns.
That makes sense. If you don't have times, it doesn't make any difference. It's whether that's only 2 months on and now. And the evidence from Wales will of course prefer to be referred to as a city.
It's a likely, but I take that question. Thank you. Right, Councillor Dutch.
How that works. I kind of wanted to respond to Councillor Hazel. It was a very eloquent kind of presentation, and as someone who is
kind of new to this and has not been involved in the history, I think a perspective from someone outside this council is really, really helpful to kind of see the frustration that in a way we all have in the amount of work that is going into this when it could have been avoided. And thank you as well, Andre, for your very clear update. My question is around the consultation, and you said that there may be people who come forward and say here are alternative sites, and they would have to kind of prove that they are more sustainable and I think more suitable. I can't remember what the other more deliverable. I'm just kind of wondering how you would assess that so that it's a really kind of objective decision as to whether those are accepted or rejected. Is there like a set of criteria that you go by?
So the approach which is set out is the summary which you've got before you, kind of is a high level summary of the sustainability appraisal and the site assessment templates. But we each of the sites which came through the call for sites were assessed against a whole range of criteria. So we would adopt the same approach. There is a difference in this exercise because it is so limited in terms of timescales where a site might come forward within the plan period. So I think we're also considering, well, if this site is going to be part of the 505 dwellings, there has to be a good reason for it coming forward and contributing something. Now, a lot of the sites, that's a different exercise from, say, the Somerset plan, which we'll be looking over a 15 to 20 minute time period, and where the site might have some issues that could be resolved within a 5 year time scale. So we have indicated that the sites call for site exercise, your site might not be chosen, but it will be looked at again within the context of the Somerset plan. But that plan will have a different starting point because we're not looking at simply form in the area. So the whole way that it looks and towards that's a reshape very different thing. So how do we look at the sites from also maybe some of the basic criteria will be the same, but we're here, we've got examples in this call for sites where got a lot of sites come forward in the same village. I think it's not an exercise for now to perhaps pick one site out of half a dozen or a dozen sites in a village. You know that village will be somewhere we consider suitable over a 20-year period. So there will, if they come forward, they'll be assessed using the same methodology as they're completing the hearing. But they will be looked at again, but the context will be very different. So that's helping.
I think I noted on the table of sites being proposed that you haven't taken the total housing on a particular site, but you've taken an example instead of 90 houses, you've only counted 60 of them because you think the likelihood of delivery is going to be beyond the 2028. And the question I have is, are you being optimistic or very conservative about that split?
I think those judgments, it's very difficult to get a developer. They'll tell you they'll build some stuff tomorrow. But I know what they told us at the local planning examination, but I know what's happened since. So these are the same estimates that we use for the housing outlook. So you have to also give a lead in time for actually the sites to come forward. Generally, within the subset area, we're building between 30 and 50 houses a year based on the circumstances. So there's a bit of a track record in how much can be built out. We are obviously being cautious by not putting not trying to estimate far higher numbers that might come forward. So we kind of know what equivalent from our here. I think it's probably worth mentioning, which I haven't previously, is that quite a number of the sites have got permission already. Because we are going back to 2019, so we have advice to suggest that actually that's a reasonable thing to do. They're clearly much more likely to be delivered by next point. Hopefully, but I think we're trying to be they're fairly cautious estimates. And obviously they use the same approach that we have taken when we're discussing 5-year supply and appeals, for example. So we're reasonably confident with that, but they are still an estimate, of course.
Thank you. I think it's just worth having on record that there's been a very well considered exploration of the actual deliverability of these sites. And so I thank you for your efforts on that. Sorry. Yeah, I apologise. I made a comment which without the mic. We have new mics in the room, and I expected the chair's mic to stay separate, but obviously not. My apologies. I was just saying that I appreciate the effort to be very pragmatic about deliverability, because we want to get this right and not prolong this process any further. I have online Councillor Kay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Kay, representing Frome East. I also would like to thank the Chair of Norton St Philip for his contribution at the beginning of the meeting, how he explained the situation and how Inspector Fox misdirected us. If you look at the paper on paragraph 18.6 on page 11, it actually says, it explains it there. And I'm pleased that I think he said they were going to put in a complaint to the planning inspector. I'm just interested also to know that the waste of time involved and the costs, and also our policy officers working on this, meant that there was a sort of an opportunity cost when we were a Mendip District Council, and that they couldn't do some of the other things that we wanted them to do, like develop some supplementary planning documents, because they were so busy on this. And I'm just wondering if there is going to be any chance of any kind of compensation for the amount of time that we've spent on this and the costs that we have to allocate to this. Is there any way that we can recoup any of those costs? Thank you.
I will refer to the head plan.
Unfortunately, there is no provision for an application for costs in these circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to add stress and everything else on the council as well, as we all know. However, we are where we are now, so I just want to echo my thanks on that. If I don't have any other questions, can we have a look at the recommendations? We're being asked to recommendations A to D. The first one, the draft site allocations consultation document in Appendix 1, which identifies the housing sites as directed by the High Court order made on the 16th of December 2022 and varied on the 14th of July 2023. The second item, but the draft site allocation consultation document, the environmental reports and supporting documents listed in this report are published for a 6-week public consultation as soon as practically possible, but no later than the 28th of February this year. C, that any minor changes necessary to the documents following this meeting and prior to the start of consultation are delegated to the head of planning for approval in order to expedite the consultation. And finally, D, noting the timescales for the review and that the responses to the consultation and any final amendments are due to be reported to the subcommittee on the 20th of June to meet the amended timetable as proposed to the High Court. Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Richard, and a seconder, Councillor Darch. Thank you. Are people content with that? Thank you. It's been passed and very quickly in relationship to the amount of effort. So my thanks again. I think we recognise that despite what we may not think about the judge's concerns, we've done this with tremendous amount of effort. And thank you, because I know the area of planning has well and truly been squeezed by this area. And we want to move on to our new local plan. Right, item 7, we've got the making of the neighbourhood plan. And this is the very end of a very long process. So can I invite Anne Rose to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm very pleased to bring before you the Rushden and Bonflagon neighbourhood plan to be made, part of the development plan, when it would be used therefore in determining planning applications for the neighbourhood areas. That is the parish of Rushden and Bonflagon. As Chair has already alluded to, this is the final legal stage of a very long process. The parish council and the neighbourhood plan team have over a number of years been developing their neighbourhood plan. It contains a total of 23 policies covering a very wide ranging range of things, including transport, protection and provision of open services and community facilities, providing the local housing based on local need, and particularly with an emphasis around housing for the more elderly members of the population. Planning for safe cycle and pedestrian travel and for expansion of existing rights of way, as well as protecting wildlife sites and habitats, banks, trees and hedgerows, and heritage. They have, through their neighbourhood plan, this is the first of our neighbourhood plans, that have designated locally important heritage assets, which is really nice to see. They've also got policies around flood defences, local employment provision, bomb diversification, and community hubs. A full list of policies is attached to your report. So this plan has been through various legal stages to get to this point. That has included statutory consultation undertaken by the parish council themselves, submission to the council, where we undertook regulatory consultation and independent examination of the plan, and that independent examiner recommended that with modifications that plan gets to a referendum. That was held on Thursday last week, and there's an addendum to the report which you will have received, where it sets out that 92.45% of those voted in support of the plan, which is a really, really encouraging figure. And they had a turnout of about 24%, which equally for a referendum for a neighbourhood plan is very good. So that is a good demonstration of the level of support in the community for this plan. In line with the regulations, I'm now bringing that before you, because when a neighbourhood plan has been through referendum and supported by the local community, it comes before you to be made. There are only very narrow circumstances by which we would advise you not to make that, and that would be if the plan was not in conformity with human rights or in conformity with the environmental regulations as transposed into British law. So the obligations under European law. I'm pleased to say that it conforms with all of those, so there are no legal grounds on which not to make this plan. I'm happy to take questions. I've set out in my report quite detailed process that's gone through to get to this stage, but I'm sure you didn't want me to read through all of that.
Thank you. And I have myself one question. Anyone else have questions? No, just one, just reassurance. Oh, I have a hand online as well. You've got a number of heritage assets listed which have local importance. Have these been shared with the South West Heritage Trust? Because they are holding the list of such assets.
Yes, they have been shared with South West Heritage Trust. And as a result of the work that the Neighbourhood Plan Group have done, the Heritage Trust is taking their assessment and will be putting that onto their website as the evidence as to why these are assets of local importance.
Very good news. Councillor Wakefield.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm one of the two councillors for this area, and I do want to celebrate the work that's been done in the community around this local plan. You know, they've worked incredibly hard over a number of years. I would also like to add, it's a much needed thing. This is an area on the edge of Taunton. It's outside Taunton. It's on the other side of the M5. It's subject to attack by developers all over the place. There's a very much needed upgrade of the A358 that goes through the parish. because there's a huge problem with pollution on that, so within traffic. So there's all sorts of things going on very close to and within this parish, including actually regular flooding as well. So they do need something to support then when it comes to planning applications coming in this area, and I think this neighbourhood plan will help that. So I would like to thank everybody who's worked on it, including of course you, Anne, but you know, everybody on the committee as well, because it's been a really, really long job, but it's really well done. So thank you.
Thank you. We have online somebody called Mel. Perhaps they could introduce themselves before asking a question.
Hello there. I hope you can hear me. I'm speaking on my iPhone. My name is Mel Mullins. I'm the chairman of Royston and Thorpe Falcon Parish Council, and I was very pleased to have members of the neighbourhood plan team attend your meeting to see the plan met. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Little muffled, but yes, do carry on.
Okay, thank you. All I wanted to say was thank you to those members of the neighbourhood plan team that are in attendance this afternoon, and thank you to Anne Rhodes for her professional advice and guidance in making this come to your table to be made today. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Right, I'm very happy then to make this plan. Could I have a proposer, please, and a seconder? Councillor Evans and seconded Councillor Dodge. Could we have a show of hands to support? Great. I'm happy to say we've made a local plan, neighbourhood plan for Rushton. Well done, congratulations. Right, shall we move on to item 8 now, which is the Wells neighbourhood plan? And would Chair Milling like to introduce this? I think you can take on board, but we've had a very good description of a neighbourhood plan.
Yeah, thank you. It's similarly to the previous neighbourhood plan, the Wells neighbourhood plan is the final stage in a long process involving significant amounts of public consultation and public examination. And the referendum was held at the end of January, where 81% of those voted in favour. We have had a question submitted on the item, and I will provide a full written answer to that question. But most of the concerns raised in that centre around the way in which the historic environment is treated. And the plan does contain 2 policies for the historic environment. Several policies on the landscape setting and the surrounding environment. And it also has a design guide set out as one of the appendices to the report. The Historic England didn't raise any concerns about the way in which the plan treats the historic environment. And during one of the stages of public consultation, they were very complimentary about the work that's been done. One of the concerns that was raised was around a local list of non-designated historic assets. And that's something that the neighbourhood and the City Council will take up as one of the community projects. So the comments made about the local list, I think, refer to work which is perhaps in the past. And they're going to pick that up as one of their specified community projects and develop a new local list. So hopefully that will help to allay some of the concerns around that previous local list exercise. There were also concerns raised about housing numbers and the distribution of housing, but that actually isn't an issue for the neighbourhood plan, which really looks only to development within the confines of the neighbourhood plan area. So I think those comments are outside the scope, but more relevant to the upcoming Somerset plan. So the council is, as was previously said, obliged to make the plan unless there are concerns around environmental legislation, if transposed from EU legislation and human rights convention. And those, the the question doesn't raise any issues of that nature. It's more related to an opinion of the examination and the process to date. So I will provide a full written response to that, but the recommendation is to make the plan today.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions on this? Okay, there's nothing online. I would just like to make a comment, and that is, I recognise that local plans can determine what areas they wish to cover, and where they cover. They state very early on in the process the geographic area they're covering, and then they determine what areas they seek to make comment on. And I would just like to say that I'm very disappointed that the plan is silent on a really critical thing for I believe in the City of Wales, and that is it does have a role as a market town in respect of the large amount of people living in the rural communities around Wales, and those people have not in any way been taken into account when looking at facilities and parking and all the other things within the town. Now, it's entirely up to them, up to Wales to be silent on this issue, but I do think it's disappointing that it's the case. However, that doesn't make in any way that this isn't a plan which we should make as it stands as it is. Could I advance any other questions? Could I ask for a proposer and seconder on this? Proposal, Councillor Evans, and the seconder, Councillor Wilkes. And could I ask for a vote to support this local plan? There will be 3 votes for it and 1 abstention. Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. We shall then move on to item 9. And this is the adoption of the Somerset Biodiversity Net Gain Guidance Note. And getting your head around this has been quite an issue for many of us, and I'm very grateful to Graham Dawson, who's here today to talk about his report. It's as complex as the title. Over to you, Graham.
Thanks, Councillor. I've just realised I'm not in the meeting. I'm link. Can you quickly pull that over to me and then I can put the slides up? Sorry. Thank you. Forgot about technological.
Just make sure you make yourself able to
Yeah. Sorry about this. Okay, sorry. Right, thanks for that. So yes, this is about adoption of the Biodiversity Net Gain Guidance Note. I've got a few slides to go through that just kind of help explain what Biodiversity Net Gain is in basic terms, where we are, why we need this guidance note, and what the details of the report are. So I suppose starting with the why. We're all aware that the UK is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world, and as part of that, we're seeing significant species biodiversity decline across the country. A few years ago, the government published their 25-year environment plan, which set out an expectation to work towards a position of having environmental net gain as a requirement of new development. The first step of which was to bring forward biodiversity gain through the planning process. In 2021, the Environment Act came to was made. That brought about the legislative environment for biodiversity net gain to become a requirement of planning permission. As well as that, it requires local authorities to develop local nature recovery strategies, and it strengthened the duties through the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act, placed upon us as a local authority to conserve and enhance biodiversity through the actions that we take. Since that, we've had the regulations published and finally made in January, noting that there were some changes between the drafts published in November and January, which we're just about on top of now, I think. And we are still waiting for the absolute final government guidance in terms of planning practice. But the requirement has now come into effect. So from the 12th of February, any application for major development is required to submit information to do with biodiversity net gain, and any permission, therefore, resulting from that, is required to deliver biodiversity net gain. And that requirement will be extended to minor development from the 2nd of April. What's meant by biodiversity net gain? It's about leaving the natural environment in a measurably better state than it was beforehand, and that measurably bit is the key part. So it's about ensuring that at least 10% biodiversity net gain based on a measurement above baseline before development. At least that 10% is delivered, and that is secured for a minimum of 30 years. Biodiversity net gain is a complement to every existing protection that arises through policy and through law, and it doesn't do away with any of those requirements which continue to exist. And it's something that, because it is a legislative requirement rather than a policy ask, it's something that can't in any way be negotiated away. And within that, there is therefore a risk to the achievement of wider policy objectives through the planning process, particularly if there is a reliance from developers on the use of statutory credits, because they are significantly more expensive than anything else. So I mentioned that this comes in for major development now, in due course for minor development. There are a number of exemptions to go along with that. So as I said, to start with, small development, minor development is exempt to April, but there's a number of other exemptions within there as well that are on the screen and set out in the report. And a particular note, householder applications, so your application for an extension and things like that are not caused by biodiversity net gain. And self-built and custom-built house building, as long as it is of a small scale and that's set out within the guidance and regulations, what that means, they are exempt from that requirement. It only applies when we are making a decision to grant planning permission. So it doesn't apply to situations such as prior approval applications or listed building consent or reviews of minimal permissions, etc. How is it delivered? There's 3 options. Firstly, it's delivered on site, on the development site. Secondly, it can be delivered through off-site solutions, so securing delivery of that 10% or half thereof from a second site, which is being enhanced by biodiversity, or as a very last resort, use of statutory credits, which is essentially a case of purchasing an offset from government and those biodiversity improvements would happen anywhere in the country. Nationally, there is a biodiversity gain hierarchy, which it builds on what I've just said there. So it emphasises that credits are the last resort, and that certain habitats, particularly higher distinctive ones, should always be avoided and mitigated for before you start looking at offsetting in any way whatsoever. The biodiversity net gain is measured through a statutory national metric, and that's the only metric that can be used. A certain amount of information needs to be provided alongside planning applications for us to process and understand the relationship of the proposals alongside other aspects of the development proposal. And that's set out nationally. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But the submission and approval of the final biodiversity gain plan is a post-permission pre-commencement condition. So that is not nailed down and absolutely finalised until after a permission has been granted. There are specific arrangements for phased development. So, for instance, where we get applications for an outline application and reserve matters on detailed development phases, where specific requirements are in place for that to make sure that that process works effectively. So I mentioned that this is a national requirement, but there are some limited areas where we are able to tailor the approach locally. In particular, is validation requirements. So I mentioned a second ago about the information that needs to be submitted alongside planning applications. We are able to require more information locally, and we propose to do so. Our planning processes, so how we ensure that BNG is considered alongside other requirements of planning through the application process. In particular, making sure it's considered right from the word go, from site selection, not from just an additional thing that a development that's going to happen anyway is going to have to deliver. How are we going to secure any claimed gains? And that's through use of Section 106 terms and conditions. How the delivery can be tailored, our process for enabling these off-site solutions, and our expectations around monitoring. So we published a draft of this for consultation in November, and we're making, or we made some tweaks rather, in response to the comments that we received. Just quickly kind of explain what we got back, I suppose. So a total of 88 responses, which it isn't a huge number, but there was strong feeling in what came back. Particularly, as part of that, there was a poor response from the development industry. I think that's probably because of the timing of the consultation and when the government published their draft regulations and draft guidance, and perhaps keeping powder dry in advance of that. We did consider whether there was a need to extend the consultation or reconsult as a result of that. Felt that there wasn't a need for that though, because the regulations that came in, they didn't drastically change the direction of travel from where we thought we were going with this anyway, where we thought they were going with this. And we're not looking to change the guidance drastically as a result of that, so it didn't feel like that was a necessary thing to do. The general public did find that this entire concept and topic was difficult to grapple with, and I'm sure there's a lot of thinking around the room in that regard. The detail is very hard to understand, but what they did say was they generally supported the processes that we're suggesting to put in place and the approaches. Really high levels of support for the BNG principles for Somerset, strong support for definitions of strategic significance, which we'll talk about in a second. What there was less support for the approach to enabling off-site delivery mechanisms and for our monitoring approach, but most of the concerns in that regard were about concerns with the wider national picture and what matters. For instance, people suggesting that we shouldn't be allowed, developers shouldn't be allowed to use off-site or credits at all. We don't have a choice in that. That's part of the national system. What I've done is attached a consultation statement, so there's plenty of information in there if you want to go into that in any more detail. In terms of tailoring the delivery in Somerset, the guidance note sets out 4 particular aspects. So we promote a holistic approach, so not considering biodiversity on its own, but considering it against all of the other things that we as a council and as a local planning authority want to achieve through development. And we believe that this will bring improved outcomes and improved sustainability. There is a sequential approach, which the diagram there is due to, it explains that's being tweaked slightly from the consultation version, but just to provide a little bit more nuancing of the stages of the process. The point is to justify the progression from going from saying you can deliver on site to being able to deliver off site, closer to a development site, to further away, and then reliance on statutory guidance. It's pragmatic, but there is a strong discouragement in there to rely on statutory credits. Like I said, they are significantly more expensive, sometimes 2 or 3 times more the cost of delivering on site. The Somerset BNG principles, of which you've got the 6 titles in the bottom right there, they're designed to guide and inform B&G proposals, and they've been built out of existing adopted plans and policies and strategies that we have as a council and as a wider area. And so they're designed to align with other benefits and objectives that we as a council and we as Somerset as an area have. And then finally, by strategic significance, so delivering strategic nature recovery for Somerset. I'm not going to go through the detail of this because it's confusing, but essentially using published data that can be used to say this is a priority area for delivery of biodiversity again in time. The local nature recovery strategy will perform that task. As we know, that's not in place yet, and we'll get more detail on that later this year. I mentioned about validation requirements. The national statutory minimums are entirely insufficient for us to be able to understand how biodiversity net gain works alongside all the other things that we need to consider through the planning application process. They require effectively what's on the screen there. So an on-site baseline information within the metric, a statement relating to any on-site degradation of habitat that's occurred ahead of development, and a description and plan of the on-site irreplaceable habitat if there is any. That's the sole amount of information required nationally. The government guidance suggests that we're allowed to require additional information where that's reasonable, and we adopt it on our validation checklist. So as part of this, we're proposing to adopt an addendum to our validation checklists to set out further information requirements. Particularly, that means a biodiversity net gain statement, which will set out the developer's proposed strategy. So that's not an absolute definitive and can't change kind of plan. But saying this is broadly the way they're looking to achieve their biodiversity net gain, in particular that expected balance between on-site, off-site and use of credits. And the key importance there is in terms of that impact upon viability of development. So if we leave that sort of thing to push development, we are going to be in a situation where we have biodiversity gain plans coming to us saying that purchasing credits, which then knocks out all of the things that we've determined as being reasonable and appropriate for the permission, for instance, affordable housing, for instance, delivery of off-site and travel connections and things like that. So we need to have a good idea of the impact on viability as part of the application. And so, and in line with that, it requires additional post-development value information in the metric, particularly for on-site. And if they know what they're thinking about off-site, then that information as well. Drawings and plans, says GIS data on there, we've actually taken that out of our validation requirements, and we don't feel that's necessary at this stage. And then the use of the declaration form, which effectively says that all of the information they're providing is true to the best of their knowledge, etc., and they're providing it in, and they've got the qualifications to do what they're saying they're doing, etc. Quickly about off-site solutions. Generally, these are something that are going to be secured entirely separately from a specific planning application. That might be through a Section 106 agreement with us. We're used to using Section 106 agreements in association with development proposals with planning permission. You can do that separately from the planning permission. And that will be probably the primary way that we enable these off-site solutions to come forward in Somerset at the moment. They can also be signed through a conservation covenant with a responsible body. However, there are no responsible bodies who are set up to sign conservation covenants with biodiversity. Fundamentally, we want to make sure that we get the right off-site solutions in the right places with Somerset to deliver on that strategic nature of recovery. So our intention is to launch a call for sites in the next few months, and that will be aligned with our nutrient mitigation fund delivery program, which I understand will be reported next month. This is a non-statutory function, the signing of the Section 106 agreements. So in awareness of the financial situation, it's really important we use our resources prudently and that we charge fees and prioritise our resources appropriately as part of this, which is why we're proposing to use this call to sites process. And we're piloting our processes currently in relation to an initial site. And that will enable a supply of off-site units in the fairly short term, but with plenty more to come along the process. There's a whole range of different additional things we could choose to do as a council. I'm not going to go through these today because they are beyond the scope of us as just the local planning authority. They are for decisions for us as a council, and this particular report is in our capacity as the local planning authority, but needless to say, there are opportunities and options available to us. And just a final word that in terms of training, officers are trained now in terms of planning. We've got planning committees getting trained later in the month. And we're all going to have to continue to learn with this because it is the beginning of the process, all of this. So you've got the recommendations before you to adopt the guidance material plan consideration. I haven't put the full one for B there, but the delegation of approval for future updates is included within that, and specifically adopting as well the local B&G validation of grants as an addendum to existing validation checklists. I don't think I need to go through these risks any further, so I think probably covered them all. But I'll leave them up on the board, and then if there's any questions, I'll have to answer.
Thank you, Graham. I'm full of admiration. You've done what I think local government has forever been asked to do, work through an incredibly tight time scale with insufficient changing information as we go, trying to pre-guess what's happening so they could actually get some documents out to meet our consultation process. And the very fact you're here today is that it's going to be amazing, given, you know, the government has not made this easy for us. But I'm delighted we've got these recommendations in front of us. Would anyone in the room like to ask some questions? Councillor Darch and then Councillor Wilkins.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I support what the Chair's just said. I mean, well done. What a challenge, and thank you for kind of putting us through. I mean, we have found it really challenging to understand because it's so complicated, and I've had sight of this for months, and I'm still, when you get into the detail, it's quite easy to get a bit lost. So I think you've done a great job. I think, you know, we're very aware of the risks that you've outlined in the report around the pressure on our own resources as a council, and also the threat to delivery in terms of viability. So completely aware of that. But for me, I just really welcome this as a statutory requirement because it means we have to do it and developers have to do it. And, you know, for so long on planning committees, we've been, you know, the public are understandably frustrated that we are not insisting on zero carbon homes and all the things that we know that that's the way buildings should be built. We can't insist on that. At last, when it comes to biodiversity, it's like there's no argument about this, it has to happen. I've no doubt that there'll be lots of teething problems. I think it's going to be a kind of a bit of a muddle, and until the system levels itself out around land prices, that's going to be tricky. But I think we're really at the beginning of a change, and I think that we're going to see, this will become as embedded and as natural as equality and diversity. It should be like breathing, that, it's just accepted that we have got to consider biodiversity in any planning and development. I was at a parish council meeting last night, and I was quite pleased to see that they're being asked for biodiversity duty and policy from SALC now as well. So it's kind of filtering right down. I think most of the neighbourhood plans that you've seen have also got all of that in there. So I think it's going to be easier when it's firmly linked with the local nature recovery strategy as well, and that's got kind of planning and mapping of kind of Somerset and habitats all kind of working together. But I do really welcome it. I think it's a step in the right direction, and thank you very much for all the work that's gone into it, which has been massive.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkins.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to echo all of that. However, there is a cynical side to me that worries about certain risk. I was looking on page 222 at your net loss, net gain for biodiversity. And but my question really is about risk, really to do with developers or pre-developed sites being biodiversity stripped before it comes to you. Is there any checks involved in that, and how is that mitigated?
Yeah, so I only mentioned it very briefly, but degradation, then there is a requirement within regulations that if there has been any habitat degradation since the January 2020, I think it is, which is the date that the Environment Act came to Parliament, then that needs to be taken into account. So they don't get to trash the site and then say, this is our baseline. There's a fair step within that.
Thank you. Any other questions in the room? I'll go, I think, online. And is this Councillor Kay?
Yes, it's me again. Thank you, Ros. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't put my camera on. Yeah, I think this is a long time coming. I echo what Dixie Darsh has said, and it's very welcome. My concern is, having seen this in practice in my own division, where we've had a lot of big estates built, is that sometimes you'll have hedgerows around fields which will come down, and the biodiversity gain or net gain will be in the form of swallow boxes going on to properties, or an attenuation pond that's planted with long sward grass in order to satisfy the need for bats foraging. And my two sort of issues with that are that there's a gap. There's a gap of 3 to 5 years, both from the hedgerow first coming down to the swallow boxes or the attenuation pond being built, and what happens to all the insects and the critters and everything in between. Yesterday, some of you will know Michael Gove, sorry, it was somebody else, a housing minister, was on the news talking about things to do with planning, and people were commenting that community facilities need to go in first rather than being added on after. And I'd like to see that approach here as well. I'd like to see those habitats being put in place early on, so that we haven't got a 3-year gap where all the local species die and then are expected to somehow come back. And I just wondered if that has been built into the system. That's my main question, really. I've also got some concerns about a lot of this hinging on the nature recovery network, because and who's deciding on that, but I'll leave that for when we get to talk about it. But if you can answer the first question, please, about that sort of time lag and what happens to all the biodiversity in between. Thank you.
Yeah, so without overcomplicating things with this, as we all understand it, it's very complicated if this works. The things like swallow boxes or bat boxes or anything like that, they are not something that is dealt with through biodiversity net gain. Biodiversity net gain uses habitat as a proxy for biodiversity. So those species-specific solutions, if you like, they are not habitat, they do not count. So the other part of it is that it's measured in 3 sort of modules. So there is an area module, a hedgerow module, and a watercourse module to this. And you're not allowed to trade credits between those things. So if you're losing bits of hedgerow, you can't replace it with grassland improvements or woodland planting, you have to replace it. In terms of time lag, there are penalties effectively built into the metric. So if there is a 5-year time difference before the proposals, the habitat proposals, enhancements are going to reach their target condition, then that will score worse than if it's a 1-year time difference. So there's lots of ways that you're incentivized through the metric to deliver the right solutions to replace the habitat that's being lost and do so in a timely manner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that all sounds really positive. Thank you. That's quite reassuring. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? I would say that one thing I would like to echo, and I think Councillor Dart mentioned it, and that is land values in the short run will mean that the viability of sites for affordable housing are going to be really challenged. And I think we need to sort of try wherever possible to help mitigate that. But I'm really, really concerned about that, but I don't think there is a simple answer. Thank you. Councillor Wakefield.
Yes, on that point, I don't know exactly the same point actually about five. I'm really worried. It's great to load things onto the development, so they have to be done properly in the way that we want to do that going forward. I'm very concerned about the land banking that's gone on, or very expensive land that isn't being brought forward. The government, I'm sorry to say, at this point, need to bring something in to bring that land forward. It's there, it's ready to be developed, but it was too expensive at the time. Now, I don't know whose fault that is, I suppose it's the marketplace. But we need to do something about that. There needs to be some encouragement to bring that bank land forward with all these advantages that we can add to it as well. But you know, that is a problem for this country, that the land that is banked is sitting there waiting to be developed and not being brought forward.
Totally support what you're saying, and I think Somerset has probably got an added issue, and that is the cost of phosphates. And that will, I know we can do some stacking of credits, but we're going to have to be as clever as we can on this one. Okay, we have in front of us, if there are no other questions, 3 recommendations. Then within your pack, I think you have them up on the screen as well. Are people content to take them forward? This is the adoption of the guidance notes, to delegate some authority to do minor amendments to the guidance notes as and when the national legislation changes, and any more significant changes will come back to this committee. And the third one is to adopt the local BNG validation requirements as an appendant to the existing local validation checklist for each local planning authority planning area. And of course, there will be 4 in this county, plus minerals and waste ones as well. And that will be the case until such time as we integrate them. So could I have a proposer and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Darch and Councillor Evans. Could I have a show of hands? People happy to support? Thank you. And our thanks again for a very succinct presentation, given the complexity of the issue. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And we will no doubt hear more as the government issues more information. Right, shall we move on to item 10? This is the Somerset Development Plan and the biannual update. And we have with us Laura Higgins with us this afternoon to give us an update on where we are on this.
Thank you, Chair. This is a short report for members to note. We're planning to bring to members a 6-monthly update report on the local plan to summarise what's been happening, what stage we're at. This is the first of those reports. So I've summarised what we managed to do in the past year, given the resources we've had, which have been significantly affected with the amended local plan. So the key aspects that we delivered so far relate to the adoption of the local development scheme, the statement of community involvement towards the end of last year, and the other significant pieces of work which we've just started are the commissioning of consultants for the all-important evidence base that we need to kick off with. The first few that we've gone out to consultants for the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment, the Strategic Flood Risk Assessment Level 1, and the Local Housing Needs Assessment. Those are the first three at the moment. Then the next three to follow on from that are the Open Space, the Landscape Character Assessment, and the Economic Development Needs Assessment. And we started some early work in-house as well, some further evidence base that we can commission or undertake ourselves with in-house skills and capacity. And then next steps will be to carry on with those evidence-based studies with the consultants or in-house, and to commence work on the spatial portrait, which will be the characteristics of Somerset and the local areas. And then we'll move on to the visioning exercise, which will involve members in terms of understanding what our vision and our issues and objectives are. Also commencing duty to cooperate discussions and doing a corporate size later in the year. So that's the brief summary of the local plan. Don't believe Helen Bidgery is here to talk about means and ways, but if you just take it as read, her section on the report. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? I'm aware that alongside this work you're describing, we have the waste, the minerals and waste review, and I also believe that the local transport plan is being considered too. And I also believe as part of the changes with the letters with Green Things transition into the county, that we're going to be developing over a very short order an economic plan over, I think, by the end of the summer, which will help feed in. And then the final thing, again, trying to pull this together is, I believe that we're going to have to do some land usage activity across the whole of the council as well. So this area is going to be really busy for everybody. And I think, unless there are any questions, I can thank you for the efforts today. I know that it's only a start of a long journey, so I'd be delighted to see you here again to tell us where we've got to on all the different strands of the work and how we're going to bring them all together. Thank you, Laura. Right, if there are no other questions or comments at this stage, I believe that we're just being, if we've got any recommendation, I think we're just noting what's been told. So thank you very much indeed. That I believe is the end of our agenda today. So delighted to say thank you to everyone for attending. And great that we've made 2 neighbourhood plans, which is always a good end of a very long route. And I look forward to hearing more about our local plan, not just the remains of Mendip, but actually Somerset Council. Great, thank you very much indeed, everyone. We'll call the meeting to a close.
And you can 35 minutes over. Yeah.